Not too long ago, a friend and I were having a catch up. The conversation was quite typical. How are you working on yourself? Are you on it with the gym, business, etc. Right? And I remember bringing up to him in the conversation that something that I've actually been really getting into and really enjoying is writing. And I don't mean just like typing away, having a notepad, maybe going somewhere, maybe just being at home, and just putting pen to paper. I could tell that this really piqued his interest. He really leaned in. He mentioned something interesting, which was that none of the boys do that, or none of the boys would do that. And that sat with me for a second, and I thought, that's probably true. Nobody I know writes. So I wanted to make a video exploring that in a bit more depth. And before I even go into it, I mean, the question I'd pose to you is, when's the last time you wrote? Can't really go into the habit aspect of it without covering the initial motivator first. If I take you back to around lockdown time, this is when a mate of mine would meet up quite regularly. We would usually have some type of work session in place. Now, it's really interesting to me if I think about that time and reflect upon it. It was almost like an amplifier of what you were doing or where your mind was at. So if you were someone that wanted to be lazy or someone who was lazy, it probably made you more lazy, got more free time, and you were chilling more. If you were someone that wanted to kind of work on something and get into like some type of developmental thing, you had more time to do so. I wanted to be as productive as I could be during this time. And I guess a friend of mine was in the same boat. So we would regularly meet up for like work sessions. We're having these regular work sessions, usually at his house, and he's reading the book Atomic Habits, and he's looking to implement a bunch of different habits for both positive benefit while removing negative habits. At the same time, I remember I'm reading through GTD, so David Allen's Getting Things Done, and trying to implement that methodology within my lifestyle. And I remember during one of these sessions, he gives me a gift, and that gift was this, a notepad. And it wasn't just like a regular notepad, like one of the cheapy £2 ones. It was like, I could tell this is like a proper premium thing. It had this thick wooden bark effect. If I opened the pages, I could tell like through the thickness of the pages that this is going to be enjoyable to write on. And I really appreciated this. I've never even thought to spend money on a notepad other than, ticking the box of I need a notepad, let's go and get like whatever the cheapest notepad would be. And this was really eye-opening because my typical experience or my typical kind of perception of writing on a pad, I understood why it wasn't something I would do. Right? There's probably like two main reasons that probably come under this. One of which is that we're in a very tech-enabled, fast-paced lifestyle, and I'm not like a dinosaur by any means. I like to be up to date with having the latest tech, but we probably consume information at too quick of a rate than people perhaps understand or comprehend. A notepad or writing or even reading on the flip side is like too slow. If you're comparing going from like this fast to this slow, there's like an adjustment period you have to go through. These days we don't like to do anything that's uncomfortable. We don't like to do anything that puts us in any state of boredom, because that boredom is usually filled by something like this. The other reason is probably what has been my association of writing on a pad up until this point. And usually it's one of these, cheaper notepads, very flimsy. You've got that thin bleached white type of paper. What have you probably used it for? You've probably used it to scribe down notes either in school, college or university for something that you probably didn't enjoy doing. So it really kind of broke the mold that I had when it came to something like writing. But that was just the introduction to writing. That wasn't the thing that really solidified it for me. And for that, I have to really paint a picture for you on a particular day. I think it was June 2022, hot summer's day in Glasgow. I know, hard to believe. And I think it must have been about 25 degrees or so. So at this point in my life, I am out of full-time work. I'm transitioning to becoming a freelancer, around the media stuff. I believe, I've got what it takes in order to make that a career. So I've removed like that safety net of working the 9 to 5. So I'm able to put more time and effort into, kind of making this my thing. At the start, when you're your own boss, it's kind of hard to get in the rhythm of doing things. You don't have anyone to answer to but yourself. For you to get to grips with that and making yourself an effective worker without the needs of any external factors like that, it takes a bit of effort and getting used to. And I was very early on, so this wasn't something that I had in place at all. So I remember I'd be getting up quite late, I'd be waking up quite late, And I remember there was a day during the summer, it must have been like 2 or 3 p.m. I'm looking at the window, I've not done anything, my day's not even really started. I'm just lying lazily in bed, and I can see that the sun is like belting down. And I'm also going through like a bit of a struggle, and it's something I need to do a bit of figuring out for. I've got way more going out than is coming in, and I don't really have a solution as to making this freelancing thing profitable at this point. So up and off I went, and I went to my local nicest park, which is Pollock Country Park, right? And that's the park that I am in just now. I'm actually on the golf course. There's one lovely bench that I usually use to sit. It's away from all like, the general public, and allows me to, kind of sit here peacefully with the occasional golfer coming by and then hitting a shot. What I essentially done was, I remember titling this entry in this notepad, and I called it the escape plan, with a few arrows pointing upwards, right? To represent that I was going to cause it. Essentially what I done was I outlined, my state of mind at the time, what's led me to come to the park. I made like a couple of quick notes on how, I was feeling very lazy. I needed to kind of freshen up my environment. So I thought I would leave the house. It was giving me such a warm and fuzzy feeling and stuff, right? And it allowed me to tackle something that was bringing a lot of discomfort within my life. And that this warmth was allowing me to, kind of tackle this discomfort that I was feeling within life. And I was writing down all the possibilities and all the different, avenues and things I could explore. After the session, it was like a weight had been lifted. Not just the act of writing itself, but the walk, the journey of walking to a place. The stream of thoughts that will, enter your mind are typically going to be a bit more positive, a bit more productive than they are if, you're sitting idle at home or, lying in your bed. I think the coupling of both the tool of writing itself plus the walk or the journey getting there, I think that combination is really powerful, that people need to harness the impact of. If I were to really break it down, what is writing? It's really an antidote to the super fast-paced lifestyle that we have. We've got too much of a junk food rich information diet, is kind of how I would see it. We're hit with everything all at one go and at such a high rate without any stops. I mean, if you wanted to, you could scroll on TikTok for hours. It's not going to stop you doing so. It's going to encourage you to do so. So you need to put these mechanisms in place yourself to kind of safeguard yourself. If you look at the fact that you've got this book and you're writing on a pad, your attention is usually towards that one thing that you're writing about. Even if you stop and think for a moment, you're not switching on an app. You're not switching between different pages and there's different apps on here, and then that's going to keep you glued and it's going to take you away from what you were doing initially. It's very old school, it's very old fashioned, and there's a reason why people have done it for as old as civilization is itself. To really get across to you, the impact that writing has in terms of clarifying thoughts, how I want you to think of how your thoughts are up in your mind are, imagine you have a pair of old school wired earphones. Might not be old school no more with them coming back into fashion, but imagine you've got a pair of wired earbuds or earphones, right? And you've scrunched them into your hands and they're all tangled up. Now imagine that you've got 10 of these or 15 of these and you've wrapped them all together and they're all tangled up, right? That's essentially your thoughts. What writing does is it allows you to untangle all of these into something that is clear, something that's straight and linear and it makes sense. It forces that out of you. Just what I was touching on earlier on with, the association that people have with writing as like a choresome thing to do, something they're done as part of school. I think because that's carried through into adulthood, it's not something that they would up and think, it'd be cool to write, or, I should try and write. And I can't talk about writing if I don't talk about the environment in which you write, because I think that is such a huge determining factor in whether you have writer's block or whether you don't. Because I've tried writing in different environments, and I'll tell you one thing, they're not all equal. For me, ideally, I like to be in a cafe, or I've got a very particular one that I like going to, like a coffee house. And sometimes, if I'm trying to write in my room and I'm trying to force it while at my desk, and I'm having to deal with a bunch of different things, there's a lot going on, and at the same time I kind of want to jot down a couple of thoughts, it's probably not going to extract from me, the most high level or strategic thoughts or decisions. Compare that to a place like this. This is Ottoman Coffee House. Just look at the place, look around. And we were talking about it with an Ottoman, what makes this place so great? And I think I've realised that while recording this video. What makes it so great for me is the balance that it has. It's so familiar in that it's so similar to how your living room environment might be. That would be like a comfy environment, you've got sofas, it would spark conversation, but it's also exotic or distant enough that it's something that's new, it's novel. I mean, I don't have to speak too much, just look around. Creativity for me is more like how solar panels work. Solar panels generally are just taking in the energy that is coming from the outside, right? So in that case, you've got solar energy and power, energy from the sun that comes in, and that's what's generating the energy within the panels. We're the same. We don't have any source of energy within ourselves. It's God-given, and we just have to channel it in the correct way. So a lot of it just comes down to removing the blockages that would prevent the energy not flowing within. And that's where things like the environment, either externally or even internally within your mind, can have a big impact, because generally writing is clarifying. And if you've got a lot of messy thoughts up in your head, like I discussed before, you're not going to be able to produce the best result, and you may have to change your environment in order to do so. And I've explained how the outdoors and being literally like the solar panels and receiving that energy from the sun is probably the most fruitful for me. But you know, if for whatever reason, you know, the weather's not right, I would come to an environment like this, and that would produce for me very similar results. So I'll give to you some tips if it's something that you want to get into. The tools are very important, right? What you write on and what you write with are probably the most important things, other than the environment itself. Personally, I like to use a 4-in-1 pen, like one of these. In fact, this is the only thing that I write with. I used to think, you know, a nice fountain pen or like a Parker pen, you know, that's what I'd like to write with. But I like having the option of using different colors on tap. I don't want to have to switch between pens if I want to switch colors. Like if I want to tick something in green or if I want to cross something in red, I don't want to have to, you know, go faff about in my bag and get another color out. If I can just have that very tactile on one pen, I'll choose that as an option. So to me, I've given writing many different uses and things that I write about. Probably the vast majority and the bulk of it is journaling. These are essentially very analytical or strategic like thoughts. They're not like, dear diary, today I fell down and this happened. It's more so about, okay, like it's very solution oriented and problem solving based, you know, thoughts. So often like any strategic decision will be done either on a walk or through writing or a combination of both. Since getting into writing, I've switched all my, you know, gym logging onto a notepad as well. So I've got a separate, you know, notepad for that. And I think at this point I have logged over 280 of my gym sessions on that pad. I much prefer it to having, you know, something digital to type on. I don't want to be using my phone at all in the gym if I can help it. I would like to use it as minimal as possible just to ensure my focus is as high as it can be. One area where I would suggest that you probably start if you're looking to get into, you know, writing of any kind is simply do a brain dump. Open up a fresh page and just bullet point all the things that are occupying space in your mind. You'll have this big list. Once you get started by creating this list, more things will get prompted. You'll build your list more and more and more and more. I want you to go back and review the list and look at the things that are really occupying, you know, the most space in your mind. What's the most pressing, urgent matter that's perhaps blocking your attention to go towards other things because this is in the way. That's probably where I want you to begin. And then what you can do is, once you've identified what to work on, is simply write about that thing. Maybe it's like a long-standing issue that has just become a habit and it's built up over time, and really start to, you know, pick apart and extract the things from it. What you'll find is that the initial dump process will take off so much cognitive loads. There'll be like a feeling of relief, almost as if someone has taken you apart with like a deep tissue massage and put you back into the world. That's almost how that first session or two feels like. That's where I feel people are missing out on like such a key benefit. I can't get this across to you unless, you know, it's something that you do. People go through too much of life without giving this particular thing the required attention it needs, and these are your goals. People loosely talk about goals, people discuss goals in conversations, someone may ask you about your goals, but until that thing is on piece of paper with some type of strategic plan, even like a simple 2, 3, 4 step plan, you don't really have a goal in place. Probably need to get yourself some type of writing kit, and all that really is get a nice notepad that you would enjoy writing on. The thing that you probably have to look at is the GSM, so that's the rating of the quality and the thickness of paper. And then from there, find a pen that you write on. It might not necessarily be the 4-in-1 that I like to use. For you, it might be a fountain pen, it could be a ballpoint, but you have to make that experience enjoyable. And if you enjoy something, you'll stick at it and you'll do it for longer. And the more you do it, the more it becomes automatic. And when it's automatic, you do it without thinking about it. That's essentially what I would want for you if you're looking to get into writing as some form of benefit to yourself. And of course, the environment is super important. What I'd probably advise, because you're doing something kind of new, I would completely switch up your environment out to when you're doing it. Don't go into one of the same locations that you, maybe those 2, 3, 4, 5 locations that you found yourself in, whether that's like, home or like uni or workplace or somewhere else. Try and find somewhere new and novel where you've just kind of made an event or experience of it, because I think that will really freshen up and get some ideas going, and ensure that before you've got there, there's some type of walk that you've had in place, even like a 5 or 10 minute walk, with no headphones or anything in. And then getting down to writing, I think will allow you to have that pen moving freely without any writer's block. Start off with that dump and then see where it goes from there. And that's essentially it for this video. Just want to do one on writing. There you go. Now you know. I write and you should too. Peace. Salam. It is cold, man.